I'm going to do a better job than I did last time. This is March 21st, and this is a meeting of Chicago cohort of teachers, and we're looking at the third and fourth design cycle, or parts of the design cycle. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, and we'll kind of get into it. So if you're looking at, I'm going to bring up and I'm going to change the screen here so that you can see my second screen. And hopefully you are seeing the conceptual design phase. If that's true, will you give me a thumbs up? Great, very good, excellent, excellent. So conceptual design, I'm going to ask you guys to talk a little bit more so I'm not talking all the time. So if you want to just kind of chime in and talk a little bit about this whole thing today, we're going to be talking about the conceptual design, detailed design, how we're getting ready for delivery with the EPICS design process, and then also last, probably 25 minutes or so, we'll talk a little bit more about trying to implement it or expanding in your school. So that's kind of what we're going to try to do, because what we're going to do the last day is talk about the delivery phase, and we're going to talk about how you can implement it in your school. So we're going to share your plans. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Okay, conceptual design. As you were looking through this, is there anything that kind of struck you about conceptual design and the important tools that go along with it?
Yeah, I'll toss out one thing. I mean, for me, I think there was just a little bit of mention in the video about some of the ways to do brainstorming, which I found helpful because it's such an important part of it, of the process. But I find if I simply say in various groups, let's just brainstorm, come up with great ideas, it's really hard to structure that in a helpful way. So I like some of the suggestions about the ways to do that other than just kind of an open-ended group discussion.
Okay. Did any of you also look through the some more of the resources? There's an acronym called SCAMPER, and that is in the design, and that I'm kind of bringing it up now. So the SCAMPER is, there's also some cards that are in that might be helpful, and I don't know if you looked at those or if you would like to look at those. But it's an activity where the students use the different cards, and hang on, I'm going to pull them up real quick. And I think you can see, believe it, there is method to this organizational madness, but maybe it's only me that knows it. So these are the SCAMPER cards. So it has, you can give these to your kids. So it's like substitute, combine, adapt, modify, put together, use, eliminate, or reverse or rearrange. And what I thought is that these could be used in a classroom. And then down here, you could have each group take a different section of adapting. How could this be adapted in a different way so that it could be used by in a different way, so it could be used by your stakeholders or modified. So these are SCAMPER cards that can be printed out and used as an activity. So I wanted to make sure that you saw those or used them. I think they're on, and I will check that and make sure that they're on the web page, but I'm almost sure they are. But I will check with that. Okay. Any thoughts about these just getting, like Steve said, just being able to get kids to think about other ways of looking at their design is kind of an important part. Okay.
I think any of the structured stuff really helps because there's such a thing as having too many possibilities, and so the kids kind of get to a gridlock because there's so many possibilities to choose from. So, just even just one of these ways actually helps. I don't know, like even just think some words like, combine or modify and stuff, that actually helps I like the decomposition because we used this even after we were looking at a prototype because, you know, we'd have some parts that we knew how to do and other parts, you know, we didn't even think of, and it kind of helped us figure out what we got and what still, you know, what's done already.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that we want to try to do is even as you're going through the third design or you're doing through your conceptual design, you want to look as many solutions and as many options as possible. So even through this, you will have your groups design multiple prototypes so that they don't get stuck on one thought, that only one thought is the way that it should be done. And then as they get through and into 4, into the detailed design, that's where they really kind of hone it down. But you want to make sure that through 3 that they go through and they're looking at a lot of different ideas through the brainstorming and just making sure that they don't just get set on one thing. So there's a lot of the brainstorming. There's also, I hope that this is helpful, an idea list of just trying to, again, get them to put things down so that they can remember it. I'm hoping that that will be helpful. Any thoughts about idea lists or the functional well, we'll go into functional decomposition because that's a little different. Your idea list is just a way for your students to get your ideas and to somehow get it down on a, I'm going to try to make this a little bigger. So again, it's a way, it's kind of like your materials list because it's going to be one of those things that they're going to use to try to get, you know, really define their budget and so forth. So the idea list really starts to put it together. And then there's also another part about putting in their best features. So they put in their best features. If there's an ergonomic piece that is helpful, that's another part that they can put in with their idea list. So kind of working through that. Okay. Now we talked a little bit about the functional decomposition earlier. I think that was, remember whether it was in the workshop or whatever. This is one of the harder pieces of it, is really bringing down your specifications into something that is, that can be defined and brought into smaller parts so that it can be tested. All through 3 and 4, the main thing is testing everything and getting everything so that it will work. It would be bad to say design a backpack or something and the zipper not work and have it so that it won't work at all because of that. So that's this functional decomposition is an important part. Okay. So just bringing everything down into smaller parts and pieces. Any questions about the functional decomposition? Or any questions about 3, basically? No? Okay. And then here are some important parts about the decision matrix. When you're working on an after school, one of the things that I designed differently with an after school is just a real easy decision matrix called SWOT, which is your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and then threats. So this is a little more involved. And what's kind of nice about this decision matrix that's 3-7 is it could be adapted for a lot of different things. It could be adapted for different projects. It could be adapted for different parts of one project that you want to expand. So it is a decision matrix that can be used a lot of different ways. How many have you ever used a decision matrix before? Okay, Roberta has. Yeah, I've not used them very much or at all, but it makes a lot of sense to use it because what it does, it brings it into some metrics, so you can measure and actually come up with some kind of idea. So Roberta, do you want to explain, have you used this matrix or the decision matrix?
Was this the one that was showed us? Like, wasn't that cow thing, the
Yes.
decision matrix?
Right.
I used that once, not in the club. I used it with my AP kids.
Okay.
They just sort of liked it. They did 1 to 5, 5 being the best and 1 being the worst. And they actually kind of liked that idea, and then they were adapting. You know, they were acceptable if you could use this to help to introduce it to help pick the college if you were interested. So they just to get the ideas. So then they were listing what they were looking for in a college, and then reading the different colleges, you know, using it. And then we went and you know, adapt to the games we were making at the time. So we how much fun it was, how easy it was to use, how self-correcting it was, you know, if no one was around, could figure out different categories like that, apply their different ideas to it. It worked pretty well. They actually kind of liked it.
So when you were using it, I got it up here. Can you see that? The decision matrix here? Can you see it on the screen?
Yeah, I could barely read the
Okay,
name. I can see it, sure.
let me see if I can bring it in a little bit further.
I have it out and then put it out kind of small to see.
Sorry, it went down as I made it bigger. But what it can do is, and Roberta, did you use like criteria 1, like being, did you have specific criteria that you used to measure your different options for your games?
Yeah, so it was simpler than this. I think we had fewer squares or whatever. So we just picked our criteria, like how much fun, okay, and then how much we thought educational it was. We wanted to balance the two. And then with the kids weren't, you know, they were not necessarily going to be with an adult and planning it, so how instructional it could be if they were wrong, so how self-correcting it was. We used that. We used appearance, and I started a couple of years ago. It did help. There were 2 groups who were battling for the same idea, and we didn't want to give them 2 games that had the same idea necessarily. And we were able to figure out which one we should go with, and everyone was pretty satisfied when they realized everyone kind of figured out the numbers. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't like me just telling them the numbers and they weren't good, like you weren't ideal. They all kind of thought, you know, as I noticed that they have priorities, we kind of had to decide which criteria was more important than others, which that's a little bit, I don't know, it worked out well, so I was kind of happy about that.
So the point is that you were able to take competing ideas, and then you were able to put a matrix with it or a number with it, and then they were able to defend it or talk about it in a lot of different ways using different, like I said, measurements. So I guess that's the important thing. Yeah. But you could also use this for parts of your project. You could use it for your projects. You could, you know, there's all kinds of ways of using it, and it will be, you can adapt it and modify it. So it could be used however you want to use it. And if you find that you don't want to use this one, there's there's the strength weaknesses, which is another, an easier one. But it just depends on, the maturity of your kids and how much time you have and how much you want to get into it. But this is something that you can use. Last summer we had a huge discussion about what the score and the rating should be. And the college people wanted it to be 1 to 100. And the high school and lower people were talking about no more than 5 as far as your rating, because they mess up the math. And not that it's a big thing, but it takes away from what they're trying to do. So I kept it at a 1 to 5. So more in that respect. The other part of this is creating multiple prototypes. So again, trying to determine what is what the students want to do, and then starting to analyze and compare the multiple prototypes. So that's another part of this, is getting into all the testing. But again, here's another thing to remember. If all of this documentation becomes really, really cumbersome, leave it. Go on. Don't let the kids get frustrated and overwhelmed by it. These are just tools to use. They're not necessary. However works for you. But I just want to say that they're there and you can use them. But if you find that they're detracting from what you're trying to do as far as getting your projects done, go on. Just go on. And then your testing protocol. Again, these documents are all ones that are used at the university level. And that's one of the things that I kind of wanted to stress, is that this EPICS is used at I think 20 colleges throughout the United States, and it's at Texas A&M, Purdue, Drexel. A lot of different universities use it. So this is a basic design model. So it's something that you can use throughout. So you got your testing protocols, so they should be testing and doing that, and then they're updating their budget in 3. And then they should be updating their PERT and Gantt charts along the way. So these are just documents that you have in 3. Okay. Stephanie, I'm kind of leaving you out. I want to make sure that see if you have any questions or anything that you wanted to add to this conversation.
No, I just wanted to mention that I was having a hard time hearing Roberta. So that's the only thing. I can see all of the charts you're posting and everything. Okay.
Yeah, Roberta, we're having a little bit of difficulty hearing you. I don't know if you can turn up your there you go.
From last week.
Okay, not a problem. Okay, well, we'll just keep plugging along. Okay. Anybody have any questions about 3? And anything, when you get through with your design cycle of 3 and you get to the end of it, which is that, looking at that, your summary, let me see, I'm on that, yeah. So this is what should happen through 3, is that they have figured out what the big problem is. They're ready to, they have brought it down into metrics. They have figured out who their stakeholders are. They have updated personas and scenarios. They're ready. They've tested and redesigned their prototypes. They've done multiple prototypes, and they're ready to really do a working prototype. That's what they're ready to do. So that's what they do on 4, is a working prototype. Okay? Any questions about 3? Daniel, you got a question, or are you okay? Yeah, I can't hear you. Hang on, let me see if I can.
Can you hear me?
Not quite. Can you go a little louder?
Yeah, I can talk louder. So my question about the phase 3 is, how much client interaction is going on, like in between these different processes? Because it looks like some of them we're trying to kind of codify our assumptions about, or learnings about the client's needs, and then kind of run decisions against however we quantify those needs or values. Do people kind of go back and forth and actually can confirm that the way that we're prioritizing stuff is the way they're prioritizing stuff? Does that happen at a later phase? Well, what does this actually look like on the relationship side?
And they will go back and forth, and once they make those decisions and start making those decisions, they will go back and talk about it with them. When they one of the main parts where they're talking with their stakeholders is with the multiple prototypes, because they take all of those prototypes and take it back to them and say, this is what we thought, this is what we did, which parts do you think are the best? And so then they start bringing all that back together. So that's another part of that decision matrix, is that might be an option 5 or option 4 is what the stakeholders say. So you're right, Daniel, you're continually going back and talking to the stakeholders and asking them what they think. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You hit it exactly. That's exactly what should happen. Continually going back. And then that way you find out, especially before you get to a detailed design where you're getting to that final prototype, you definitely want to make sure if they're like, you're way off, you know, this is not what I want at all. You definitely want to get there before you try to make a working prototype and spend the money, because they will get to that point where they're redesigning their budget and getting the materials list and trying to figure out how they're going to do it. So, yeah. You're exactly right. By the end of 3, I mean, all the way through 3 and all the way through 4 even, you know, because it's better, even at 4, when you get into your detailed design, it's better to go back and to ask them and talk about it than to go on saying, oh, yeah, well, they don't really know what they want, so I'm going to give them that. Okay? Did you have any other questions or thoughts about that? Okay. I'm going to go on to 4. And 4 is your detailed design. So I'm going to go back and pull that up. So hopefully you're seeing that gate, the detailed design, where you're going into the final thing where you're trying to develop a working prototype, getting ready to pull it into a delivery phase. And this is really where you're getting into compiling all of the data for all of your testing. And Daniel, here's where you get into your updated field testing. You'll go back into taking this, whatever the working or whatever your prototype is that you've developed, going back into where the field or wherever it's going to be used and letting the stakeholder use it. And then watching that and making observations and testing in that domain, so that there really is this this testing within the right context. So that's another part of that. One of the huge parts of 4 is trying to figure out how is it going to fail. There is always going to be failure. There is always. And you cannot in any way completely do away with failure. Bill always uses the example of a car. If you look at a car, there is a possibility that one part of it or any of it will fail. Now, do you not have that machine because a part of it could fail? No, that's where you get into the decision matrix and what is the risk values. So that is a safety analysis that they do. That is also their usability and reliability testing, and then their safety analysis and the field testing. So in 4, they're going through all their DFMEA, which is that failure, seeing what can fail. Let me see if I can bring that up. Let's see if I'm on the right screen. I am. Okay, so you have your potential failure. So so let's say you're designing a tray for a lunchroom. So what is the potential failure? Well, it could break. You know, there's all kinds of what is the potential failure. And then you have what is the failure effects. Is it catastrophic? Will it hurt the person? Or is it minor? So that's all those decisions that the students are going to have to make. Here's your severity, the occurrence. Will it happen all the time? Will it happen rarely? Sometimes. Again, this is going to be used with your testing also to determine this. And how easy is it to detect? Can you see it? Can you not see it? You know, those are just those detections. And your risk priority number. Is it severe? Is it okay? You know, and that's how your action that you're going to use to decide, are you going to, is the risk minimal or is it something that you really have to defend or in some way redesign? Because it still could come down to redesign even at this point. So this is an important, this DFMEA is a really, really important piece to walk through. So it's an important part. Anybody have any questions or comments about the DFMEA, the failure mode? Okay. Because it's important. Okay, we'll keep going. And there's your usability and reliability test. So again, if your kids have all the documentations, you don't have to use all these forms. But again, if you need them, that's an important part too. But really talking about the usability and is it reliable? So walking through that in through 4. One of the final things that you're going and your students are going to work through is a user manual. And in this lesson, they walk through, they look at what user manuals are out there, what are some important pieces of it, and because you can't, once you deliver, it's really hard for you. You don't want to continually have to go back and maintain it. That takes your kids away from other projects, and it doesn't help the client to be self-supporting and self-sufficient. So it's important also, it's a good critical thinking thing for the kids to figure out what do they need in this, and it's a good writing activity. So I thought it was, what I saw at the college level, at the user manuals that I was getting from my kids were pretty poor. So I thought, okay, let's put a template together. So this is a template, and again, they don't have to use this. You know, they can use anything they want to, but it is something that puts in there the descriptions, general information, just the basic stuff that is in a user's manual. So it is something that they can use and they can come up with, and they can also be very creative with this. It doesn't have to be this, but it is, and it is important that they have a user manual. Okay. The materials list would also be important as they get into the final development of their project, because they are to the point now where they've tested everything, they're ready to do the final working prototype. And so they need to have a materials list so they can give it to you guys so that you can figure out how you're going to find the funding or find the pieces, or going to your principal or going to a parent or going somewhere to get the materials that they're going to need. So it also helps them to think about, in anything they have to learn what things cost. Don't forget shipping and handling, where you're going to get it, vendor numbers, URLs, all of that. So it's again a document that they can use, but it's a document they don't have to use. Okay. Any questions about that materials list? Okay. Just kind of walking things through. And then the final thing is that final testing. So their description of the project, and again, if this becomes cumbersome, don't use it. You know, if it's something you want your kids to use, if you find that your kids are scattered and they're having a hard time staying focused, this might be a good document to use. But again, it's up to you, totally up to you. You got your safety analysis and your field testing. So it's final things. Updating the personas scenarios. I don't know that I would take my time to do it, updating the personas and scenarios, because I think you've already done it, and I think it's kind of done. By this time, you basically know who your people are and your stakeholders. So I don't know that that would be important. And the Gantt chart should be pretty stable by now, unless you have some huge problem. And that could be, you know, then you have to kind of rethink the whole 9 yards. But if you have a really big a failure, then you'll have to go back. Probably go back to maybe even specifications. But again, it's cyclic, so it may be one of those things, if you have a major failure that you know is not going to work, then you go clear back. It's kind of like our robotics team with our college, they went clear back to specifications on their design, and they'd been at it a year, and they had to go back and really look at the whole thing again. But they had all the documentation, so it didn't take them as long as the first time, but they still had to look through it and go back through it. So documentation is huge. Okay. Any questions about, those are your two big, I mean, that's your design. Those are your two design model or design phases that will walk you through and get you through to a project. Any thoughts, questions, feelings about how to implement it? Things that you think, I don't want to use it? Any thoughts? Stephen, you have any thoughts or on any of this?
No, my thoughts are just I'm glad for the structure that is here. I mean, I appreciate your point that if some of this becomes too onerous and too cumbersome to extract it, I think having the process, like I was thinking of my kids who are so unlikely to sit around and think about how this wonderful design they've just created, which is fantastic, is actually going to fail. It's not something they will intuitively do. So having that as an explicit part of the process, you know, forces them to think through something that's very important, but otherwise they wouldn't.
Yeah, 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 because they, and I see that, and we do when we get really, we own it. We own this, design. I mean, not only own it physically, but emotionally we own it. And so they are not going to really want to look at this really harshly, but that it's an important part. And it's also an important part of the evaluation process is also giving quality, constructive, critical feedback to each other. So like this, the DFMEA, it might be one of those things where each group brings up their own failures, what they talk about, and present it to the group and see what the other teams think about it and give real quality, constructive feedback of what could fail. Because nothing's better than to find it out before you take it out. We know that from teaching. I mean, how many times, I don't know about y'all, but I know there's a lot of times I'm like, man, I wish I hadn't done it that way. You know, like, wow, this would have been so much better if I'd gone at it another way. So it's the same thing. Okay. I'm looking at what Nick is talking. If Nick has something he's wanting to say. Nick, you got any input into this? I mean, you can turn on your monitor or your microphone even anytime that you're, I know that you're in an office full of kids, but we still want to include you in this. So is there anything you want to add to this, Nick? I guess not. Okay. We'll let him be. Oh, here he is. I was thinking combine. Oh yeah, he says I was thinking that you could combine the Scamper with yeah, with the 635. Is that the sorry, not sure. 635, is that the DFMEA? Is that what you're thinking, Nick? Oh, oh yeah, yeah, the brainstorming chart. Okay, sure. Cool, good idea. So he's talking about the brainstorming chart and then pulling them together with, yes, you could do that. They were originally it was basically two different things, and it was, I was afraid that it was going to get too big. So Nick says to give each kid a role when they're looking into their peers' ideas. Good idea. Good idea. So would they look at like adaptability? Could it be adapted? Monitor, or what was it? So yeah, taking those and dividing them up in different ways. Yeah, giving it different roles. Good idea. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it. Okay. The last thing, we've got about a little less than 20 minutes left, and I want to talk to you about the last part, which is, I mean, you guys have gone through this. Yay! You're almost certified. What can I say? Not just certifiable, but certified. So one of the things that I was going to show you is Xavier. did a planning project. This is something that Janet Membrino did with her project. Now, I also want to remind you that Janet has been doing this for 6 years. So just know that she's been at this a while. So don't feel like this is something that you in any way have to emulate, or it's something to emulate, but it doesn't have to be there. Next week, we're going to start talking and looking at how it can be implemented at your school. So that's going to be the whole part of next week. The reason, again, for this is so that you kind of have a basic direction. And as I talked last week about this, I was saying what I would do in my community, knowing the needs of my community, knowing the needs of my students, and just kind of looking at the whole general demeanor and demographics. But also remember to think and start small. So think of something probably within your school, and probably with somebody, there's always a buddy in the school that you can work with. So somebody that you know would be willing to work with you. Xavier was working on it's a Phoenix Renew project, and what they did was there is a vacant lot in the middle of Phoenix that you can't build anything that is a permanent structure, but they're using it like a park. And so what they were asked to do is to design a sign for Phoenix Renew. And so that's what they were asked to do. So she has her statement of purpose. So it's a vacant lot in an urban setting that was an eyesore. In contrast, much of the space is used for urban farming, green space, and educational spaces, which is awfully sorely needed in the surrounding community. So she just has a statement of the problem. So that is what they're looking at. And the objectives for the project, that they have a children's play space, seating and relaxing, outdoor classroom, sustainable education, community garden space. Now, do you think that this would just be one project, or can you see that this would be multiple years, multiple projects? Any thoughts on that? Stephanie, do you have any thoughts about that?
I mean, it sounds like it'd be a more long-term, multiple project process for something of that scale. If you break it down piece by piece, you could do one project each, I suppose.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. They have not created all of this yet. And I think that if I remember right, this project they've been at this 3 years. And I think they've done an outdoor education piece, and they've done the sign, and they've done seating. So those are 3 pieces that they've done, but the objectives can be bigger, So just kind of thinking big, because this is kind of an overarching thing, but you're thinking big, planning small. Does that make sense? You're thinking little, but you have an overarching idea. A couple of the pieces that are important is she has identified her community leaders, and those are important, and then also her experts. So as you start getting into your projects, it's important to start thinking about who you would contact and maybe start looking at that, trying to figure out calling. If you're going to do something in your school, talking to your principal, talking to the custodians, because they do a lot to either say yay or nay on a lot of projects. So your custodians, your principals, anybody that could be a possible go-to person. So thinking that through. Is there any questions or thoughts about community leaders or leaders within your school, or thoughts like that? I know we started going over this last week.
One question, Jean, is, I mean, it seems to me this is a little bit more sophisticated a project in that you've got a variety of stakeholders, not just a single one.
Right.
And sometimes I have to think their particular desires and needs don't align perfectly. So is there some structure to help the kids think through that, about how to listen to one group and then listen to another group that has different needs and help them kind of negotiate that?
Yeah, as you get into going back to your number one, I mean, because in your project identification phase, they will go through and interview. And so as they have interviewing, you will get some really good information from the kids, and they will collect their own information about stakeholders. So I think that might answer some of those questions. And then once you walk through it, also when kids come back to you and say, well, I don't know whether this is exactly it or not, then you can go back and say, okay, what questions do you need to ask that will get you to that point? And then you can talk through it or have them talk together and then say, come to me with your questions. So, you know, we don't want you to have to do all the work. The point is for them to be thinking and them to think critically and solve problems. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that helps. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. So as we go on, one of the pieces, here's your basic requirements of what she's thinking about. And another thing to think about is secondary stakeholders, because you may have your initial stakeholder, which let's say that's the Phoenix Renew. The Phoenix Renew would be the city, but also your secondary stakeholder may be the people that are involved right there with the putting up of the structure, or those are your secondary stakeholders. If you're doing say you're doing an accessibility for somebody, like with Roberta's project with the ball thrower, your primary stakeholder is whoever you're designing it for, but secondary would be your the caregiver, or also could be the trainers of the dogs. Those would be your secondary stakeholders. So thinking about all of that is an important part too, because if your students develop an accessibility, but it's not helpful for the caregiver, that doesn't help anyone. It becomes more of a hindrance than it does a help. And so always getting the kids to think broad about who all's involved is an important part. Daniel, do you have a question? You okay?
No, I'm good.
Okay. You just look like you had a question there. One of a huge part, and this is really important because this is one of the defining pieces between service learning, volunteerism, and community service, is bringing in the standards and aligning standards and what they're learning with what skills they should be learning in their classroom. So it's really an important part to look at next generation science standards, your math standards, and your English language arts. Because and you could even bring in social studies. It's possible that you could be bringing in, even with what I was thinking with her Phoenix Renew project, she could be bringing in social studies of, because it's built along a canal. I'm sure that there are social studies standards with Arizona history of why that canal was built in the first place. So you can really do a really nice cross-curricular project with looking at standards, okay? But that is important because service learning has to have standards. Any questions about that? You all have, I think it's on the webpage if you needed a copy of Next Generation Science Standards. I had a whale of a time finding something that is in a PDF format because they, there's the interactive on next NGSS, but I like to have a PDF where I can see it, and walk through it. That's just me, but so I do have that. That is on the EPICS webpage for you. So if you want that, there it is. Demographics, that may not be an important part for you in your school. If it doesn't play a part in the project, then don't worry about it. If it does play a part in it, that's fine. Culture, it was an interesting thing because she was talking about the culture in her community is her school, but also when you talk about Phoenix as a whole and who would be using this, it is a little different too. So you'll have to kind of see how that works with your school. Okay. Again, this does not have to be this detailed. I'm going to specify that. You don't have to be this detailed. Again, she's been at it quite a few years, so it makes it a little easier. Okay. And then existing projects or program, is there anything, why would something not work already? Is there something that's not affordable? Is it something that just doesn't make it? So thinking about existing programs or projects. Okay. And then duration. How long is this going to last? Or how long do you think it will last? You never know. You might hit a roadblock and it's over. Or you might, decide, well, this is okay, but we have to, it's like our robotics. I am so praying that thing gets done this year because we've been at it 2 years and I'm like, we need to get this delivered. We thought we could deliver it in a year and we didn't. So that time kill, we're already a year over. Okay. Any questions about any of that with your projects? Okay. So next week, you can work on it as your teams in your schools. And then if you'll send it to me by 1 o'clock on next Monday, then we'll be ready to submit it and we'll be ready to talk about it. Do we have any closing thoughts, comments, questions? Anything that, a couple things. One is that because you guys are all in the Chicago area, you can come to the EPICS training July 7th through the 10th. You won't have, it'll be paid by Motorola. So you can come and there will be schools all over the country that will be coming and we'll have resources from, we're going to try to get some nano professionals. We're going to try to do some workshops in the EPICS lab where you can create your own prototypes. We're going to walk through some of the computer applications that go along with using CAD and so forth, and just trying to connect with different people. So I just want to make sure that everyone knew that that was a possibility and that was an option. Okay. Any closing thoughts? No? Peter, you haven't said anything.
Everybody's talked a lot. No, I mean, it's a lot of this up to this point, almost marketing management. The analysis of your product. How will it do in the market? Your market's pretty small, but a lot of it's recognizable to me as from that point of view. I think with the students, though, I was interested in that, what you were saying, we have a fear of failure, so the students definitely do. If they're not getting a grade, so they might be a little more willing to fail, but, 1, 2, 3 prototypes failing, I don't know, Roberta has more experience, keeping them interested in a project after a while. I think just kind of the one-on-one things are keeping the project going.
Yeah.
And it looks like the charts, kind of help. It gives you a goal to reach for, so keeps you on track.
And again, if they're getting bogged down in something, leave it alone and move on. You know, that's the last thing we want to do is get them so they're disinterested and they want to quit. You know that as well as I do with kids. You just see what needs to go and what needs to happen and cut the chase if you have to and go on. Because the most important thing is getting them interested in a design process and interested in a STEM field, a STEM career. That's what we're trying to do, and think critically. So whatever you can do to get it going, go. So cut things, do whatever you want. This was, like I said, this was just to be as broad of groundwork as we could possibly have so that if you needed it, it's there. If you don't need it, take it away. But somebody else might need it. You know, that was the point, is that somebody may need it, somebody may not. So it's okay. Whatever. Okay? Thank you guys for taking your time. I really do appreciate your help and your time with this. So so think about the summer workshop, and if there's no more questions, I'll go back to Nick or Stephanie. You got anything you want to say at the end?
No, thank you so much. I think that the workshop was really helpful in going back to this piece, especially for me as a non-teacher, just seeing both of the steps broken out in the workshop and then coming back to it now. So thank you.
Great. Very good. And Nick, I'm glad you like the movies. I'll tell Bill that. He'll be happy. All right. Thank you, guys. And we will see you next Monday.
All right, thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.